Good morning, afternoon or evening friends and fellow YouTubers around the planet. A greeting which I will use in future in various forms when I upload an unboxing or a software review. There'll be plenty of those on the horizon. I thought I'd do a few videos showing you all precisely how I do them, starting with this first one which will detail the essentials of how I record a piano piece, the nuts and bolts as it were. Now, even though I'll be using Telestream Screenflow to edit these videos, the principles apply to all multi-track or multimedia video editing programs, so there may be much that's of interest, no matter which platform or which video editing program you use. I will do a complete run-through of Screenflow in a future video, but in this one I'm showing how I use it for the essentials of recording a piano piece. At this stage, while I'm not going to have everything mapped out, for me it's important to script and have an overall vision and planning of how I want the video to look and sound, to structure every video and to keep my editing time well organised. This includes knowing what media I will have in my project. By planning, I can try to make sure that no audio, video or photo files are missing and have them all in one folder along with the project, ready to use before I start editing. In this first performance video there'll be virtually nothing to script, nor will there be much to structure since that has already been worked out by the composer. And for the purpose of keeping this first video simple as well, I will just use one camera to record the whole thing. However, simple as it is, it still needs to be recorded with good sound and picture quality, as well as some text at the beginning naming the piece and the composer, and some sort of outro at the end. In planning, this would be my basic structure, and this, a list of all media I intend to keep in the same folder as the project, all the equipment I need to film and record that media, and any other such considerations as placement, size and timing of the text portions. Like I said, at this stage, I don't have everything mapped out completely. Sometimes structural ideas can change, and sometimes only trial and error during the editing stages can determine the timing of the events exactly as I'd like them. But at least, at this stage, I have some sort of structural idea. So let me refer back to my equipment list and check we have everything set up. Here we have my 2015 iMac running Screenflow 10. Camera and stand. Now in my setup this is probably the weakest link. At some stage this flimsy stand will be replaced by a much sturdier floor standing one where I can film some overhead shots. The camera I'm using is that of a 2015 iPhone, which can still record acceptable results, certainly if good lighting is used. These are the two lights I use, unbranded and bought second hand for £30 in 2014. I also have a third one which I just haven't got round to using yet. This is the Kawai VPC-1 piano controller. Virtual piano software, at the moment I'm using Synthetgy Ivory 2, but in time there will be others. And finally my digital audio workstation of choice, as I prefer to use a plug-in version of Synthetgy Ivory 2 instead of a standalone version, and I'll illustrate why after I've finished recording the piece. So, having set my equipment up, I'll start by creating a project folder where my project and media files will go, just to keep things organised. And now I'll record a short piece and create the two media files that you remember I listed under the media files to add to project list. The video file with sound recorded through the internal microphone, and a separate audio file recorded directly into the computer. As you can imagine, the sound that is recorded on the video file is vastly inferior to the separate audio file. Not only because of the digital to analog and back to digital conversion, but also because the internal microphone is some distance away from the sound source. But it's still important for me to have this alongside the flawless quality of the audio file, because until someone can advise me of a device that can synchronize the smartphone camera with my digital audio workstation, and I can guess a lot of people won't have such a device, the only thing I can do is start each separately, and then what I'm going to do is record a few short loud notes before playing the piece. And then once recording is complete, I will manually synchronize those loud notes in the two files, something that's at least easier to do if I can hear those loud notes in both files played together. This is the only workaround I have at present, instead of owning some sort of synchronization device. However, there's no substitute for owning a digital audio workstation if I want to edit the piano sound of the piece I've just recorded. With an audio file of the standalone version of the virtual piano, I can only add effects from the video editor. But by using a plug-in version, I'm recording MIDI data, not an audio recording of it, thus not the instrument the MIDI data is recorded on, or the effects that come after it in the signal chain. I can therefore eliminate or change effects, or even the sound of the piano itself from within the digital audio workstation before sending the rendered file to the project folder alongside the video file and projects. Now, when I recorded this piece, I had the virtual instrument set to playing a Bosendorfer. Since I've only recorded a MIDI file, the instrument I'm playing it on can be changed, leaving the recorded MIDI region intact. So I'm going to change the settings so that we're hearing a Steinway instead, with a slight change in tone, dynamic range, and release. Once I'm satisfied with how it's sounding, I can then bounce a stereo or surround file to my project folder. When that's done, before I close the Logic Pro 10 project, I will save it in the project folder. Let's now send the video file to that folder as well. Now I'm ready to open my video editing software, in this case a screen capturing software called Screenflow. And before I start importing my media and editing, I will save this Screenflow project in the project folder, just as I don't have to think about where to save it in future. For this video, I'll only need to access 5 out of these 9 areas: the video, audio, annotation and text editors, and the media library, which is where I import my 2 media clips from my project folder ready for editing. Here in Screenflow, I can either drag-click each file into the library, or I can click this plus key and access those media files from the drop-down menu. Next, I drag each of the media files onto the timeline. I'll do this one at a time, starting with the video file. This was recorded at 1920 by 1080. I can now resize the video either by going to the video editor and adjusting the size, or, much more quickly and accurately, assuming the video is centered, it is now, by drag-clicking each diagonal corner dots until they click into place. It is now full size, while the resolution is respectable given that the content does not require 4 or 5K sharpness. Next, in the timeline, I zoom out before adding the audio file. And for now, let's keep the 2 files separate and listen to the differences in audio quality between them. As you can hear, the audio file sounds professional as it remains digital inside the computer, unlike the video file, which was converted from digital to analog sound waves which bounce off walls and gradually weaken before being picked up by the internal mic of this iPhone and converted back to digital again. So now we want to synchronize the 2 files so we can watch the video whilst hearing the professional sound from the audio file. Now remember those few staccato notes at the beginning? There should be some indication of them in the sound spikes of the video file. So I'm going to scrub through the video to that point where I should see some activity on the keyboard. Keeping the project position line in that area, I can now move my mouse to the same spike shown in the audio file, which I can then drag-click to the project position line. The 2 files are now approximately synchronized, so now I will zoom the project in so I can fine-tune the synchronization. At this point, the purpose of these staccato notes becomes apparent. Not only are these spikes a lot easier to see in the 2 files, but the sharp attacked sound makes it clearer if the 2 files are even so much as 1 or 2 notches out of sync. This is how it sounds with 2 notches, and with 1 notch, and with 0 notches. And now you can hear that the 2 files are in perfect synchronization. We can now zoom out again, and since the two files are now in perfect synchronization, we can eliminate the section of each before the piece starts. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to select both files, and then I'll scrub over to that point where the piece begins, and then I'll cut, selecting the left sections. Then I'll delete and then move the two regions to the beginning. We can also either turn down the audio from the video file, or as I prefer, cut completely, leaving the professional quality of the audio file in perfect synchronization with the video. So now before I export the video, I'd like to apply some video and audio fades. Let's select the video file, and we're going to automate some fades at the beginning and end of the region. We have various video parameters on the right: scale, X, Y, Z rotation, opacity, reflection, drop shadows, color controls, and additional filters and effects, and we can apply gradual changes of these parameters over time. This is what's called automation. However, the way we make these changes here in Screenflow is not as versatile as a fully fledged non-linear editor, or when editing sound, a digital audio workstation. Let me show you the difference. Here in Logic Pro I have a loop without any automation, and with automation. Now this orange line is a high frequency cut which increases the frequency as the loop progresses. Now note that halfway through the progression we have this blue sweep representing the Q factor or resonance, and I can change these freely and independently of each other, and of course I can add many more. But in Screenflow we have action blocks instead, in between which all parameters are transformed. You can of course add other blocks in other sections and control the position and size of each, but it isn't as versatile as that of fully fledged NLEs or DAWs in that you don't have independent control of the timing of parameters in the way that we just saw in Logic Pro. It's a slight limitation, but nevertheless an easy method, and rarely has it been an issue for the types of videos that I've done. Here we'll apply a fade out. Making sure that we're on the video editor, we first create an action block. Then after moving the track position line to the end, we move the opacity level to 0, making sure that on this side it's on 100. Then move the action block to the end of the region. We now have a fade out action here starting at 100% and gradually fading down to 0. So now let's play that. And we can repeat the process earlier in the song by moving the line to an earlier position. This time the opacity on the left will be set to 0 while on the right at 100 so that it fades in. Now we can move this back to the beginning of the region and we now have a fade in. And finally, before we export the video, we're going to add some text information. Now, common to all multi-track video editors on whatever platform, when you stack several regions of either media or text, even though you'll hear all layers of sound, it is the top layers you will see, in the same way that if I took these two iconic 80s Casio keyboards, set them both playing, and then stack them one on top of the other, you can hear both of them, but you can only see the top one when it is over the other. So similarly, I would need to insert the text region above the video, which by default it does, if I wanted to see it. Here in Screenflow, I will click the T icon here to insert text, click plus to add a text region, and then type in the name of the piece and composer. I'm happy with the text style and fonts, but I'm going to drag click over the piece name and then set its size to 288. By default, the background to the text is on, so I'll uncheck that. Move the text box to where I want it on screen, and then to make the text easy to read, I can either click the video icon and add a drop shadow, adjusting as appropriate. Or I can add a half-transparent black box that covers left and right at the bottom area by clicking on the annotations icon, adding a solid box, changing it to black, setting its transparency level to 50%, resizing it, and then arranging the regions so that the text is above the black box. Let's also change the composer's name to a gradient blue. Now that we have decided how the text is going to look and that all non-transitional parameters have been added, only now can I add my action blocks. For this video we will just fade the text and background in and out in the same way that we did with the video file, and this is where we can think about the all-important timing of the text. Then I'll have a final run through where I check everything's edited correctly before I finally export the video of this piece ready to upload to YouTube. I'll go into more detail about the different options and different formats in part 2, where I'll be comparing different file sizes and critical image quality for YouTube video, as well as asking for other people's knowledge and experience with them. For this, I will just use the default settings, which will render a decent 1080p video at 30 frames per second, and which I will upload as a separate video next.